Picture this, a dimly lit excavation site, the air thick with dust and anticipation. A team of archaeologists carefully brushes away centuries of dirt, their hands trembling as the edge of something extraordinary emerges. A fragile, ancient manuscript, its pages whispering secrets buried for thousands of years. This isn't just a relic, it's a time capsule, a direct line to voices long silenced by history. And in moments like these, everything we thought we knew about the past can shatter in an instant. For centuries, these rediscovered texts have rewritten history, revealing civilizations we never knew existed, technologies we couldn't fathom, and stories so gripping they rival the greatest fiction. Imagine holding a letter from a Roman soldier, a spellbook from a forgotten cult, or a scientist's notes penned centuries before their time. These aren't just artifacts, they're portals, and the act of deciphering them is like unlocking a door to another world. But here's the thing, every word, every symbol, every faded line is a puzzle waiting to be solved, and the solutions, they've led to some of the most jaw-dropping discoveries of all time. Today, we're diving into 30 of these deciphered manuscripts, each one a key to a mystery that once seemed unsolvable. From lost cities swallowed by the desert to encrypted codes that guarded royal secrets, these texts don't just fill gaps in history, they ignite our imaginations. Who wrote them, why were they hidden, and what truths did they dare to preserve against all odds? Buckle up, because we're about to unravel tales of betrayal, genius, and even forbidden knowledge, the kind that changes how we see our past and maybe even our future. This isn't just history, it's a treasure hunt across time, and you're holding the map. The Rosetta Stone isn't just a slab of rock, it's the ultimate linguistic detective story. Unearthed in 1799 by French soldiers digging fortifications in Egypt, this dark granite slab, carved in 196 BC, became the golden ticket to understanding a language lost for centuries. Picture it, the same text painstakingly inscribed in 3 scripts, formal hieroglyphs for the priests, everyday demotic for the people, and ancient Greek for the ruling class. For scholars, it was like finding a dictionary buried in time. But here's what makes it extraordinary. Until the stone's discovery, hieroglyphs were pure mystery. Scholars argued whether they were sacred symbols, simple letters, or some magical code. Then came Jean-François Champollion, a linguistic prodigy obsessed with cracking the puzzle. For 23 years, he compared the Greek names like Ptolemy and Cleopatra to their hieroglyphic counterparts, spotting patterns no one else saw. His Eureka, a moment in 1822, didn't just translate words, it resurrected an entire civilization's voice. Suddenly, temple walls covered in cryptic carvings could speak, revealing laws, prayers, and even grocery lists from millennia ago. What's wild is how close we came to losing it. After Napoleon's defeat, the stone almost stayed in French hands, but the British secured it as part of the Treaty of Alexandria. Today, it sits in the British Museum, worn smooth by centuries of fingers tracing its surface. Yet its true legacy isn't in glass cases, it's in every translated papyrus, every decoded tomb inscription, and every story pulled back from oblivion. This rock didn't just solve a puzzle, it taught us that even the deadliest silence can be broken. Carved into a sheer cliff face 300 feet above the ground in western Iran, the Behistun inscription isn't just a historical document, it's a death-defying feat of both ancient engineering and modern archaeology. Commissioned by King Darius the Great around 520 BC, this monumental relief spans an area the size of a tennis court. Its 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, etched with such precision that even today, their crisp lines gleam in the sunlight. But for 1800 years, their meaning was as inaccessible as the inscription's physical location. That all changed in the 1830s when a British officer named Henry Rawlinson stared up at that cliff and decided the only way to crack the code was to dangle from a rope over a sheer drop. Rawlinson wasn't just ambitious, he was borderline reckless. With little more than a notebook, a chisel, and a makeshift rope ladder, he scaled the rock face, clinging to narrow ledges as he painstakingly copied the strange wedge-shaped symbols. One slip would have sent him plummeting, but the risk was worth it. Those symbols were cuneiform, the world's oldest known writing system, used across Mesopotamia for thousands of years but utterly forgotten by the modern era. Like the Rosetta Stone's hieroglyphs, the Behistun inscription presented the same text in multiple languages, and Rawlinson gambled that Old Persian, the simplest script, held the key. For 12 years, he worked tirelessly, comparing the inscription to known Persian royal names and piecing together the alphabet like a detective solving a murder. His breakthrough came when he recognized the recurring symbols for Darius and king, unlocking the first syllables of a language silent for millennia. But the real surprise, the Babylonian section, revealed something astonishing. It wasn't just a translation. It was a dialect older than any known Hebrew or Aramaic text, a linguistic bridge to the Epic of Gilgamesh and the laws of Hammurabi. Suddenly, libraries of clay tablets buried in Iraqi deserts could speak again, telling tales of empires, astronomy, and even the first recorded customer complaint. Yes, a Babylonian merchant really did chisel a furious note about late copper deliveries. Today, Rawlinson's name isn't as famous as Champollion's, but his daredevil scholarship did more than decipher words. It resurrected an entire world. That cliff face didn't just celebrate Darius's victories, it became a time machine, proving that even the most daunting puzzles yield to perseverance. And to think, it all started with one man dangling from a rope, chasing whispers in stone. The Linear B tablets looked like nothing more than warehouse receipts, crisp clay rectangles covered in squiggles and slashes, baked hard by fires set during the Bronze Age collapse. For 50 years, scholars wrestled with these symbols, certain they represented some lost pre-Greek language. Then in 1952, a 30-year-old architect named Michael Ventris did the unthinkable. He proved everyone wrong. The key wasn't in some forgotten tongue. It was hiding in plain sight, buried beneath 3,000 years of assumptions. These weren't just ancient inventory lists. They were Greek. Ventris wasn't even a trained linguist, just a wartime codebreaker with an obsession. As a teenager, he'd heard Sir Arthur Evans, the excavator of Knossos, lecture on the undeciphered script and became hooked. While others searched for exotic Mediterranean languages, Ventris noticed eerie similarities between Linear B symbols and later Greek letters, but the academic world laughed. Greek in the Bronze Age? Impossible. Conventional wisdom said Greeks arrived centuries later. Undeterred, Ventris treated the puzzle like an architectural blueprint, creating grids to map symbol frequencies and patterns. His breakthrough came when he realized certain repeating clusters matched place names from Homer's epics, names like Knossos and Pylos that had survived millennia in oral tradition. The tablets, once translated, revealed breathtaking mundanity, lists of chariot wheels, jars of olive oil, even sheep counts, but this bureaucracy was revolutionary. It proved Greek-speaking rulers governed Crete and mainland Greece as early as 1400 BC, pushing back the timeline of Hellenic civilization by centuries. Suddenly, the Trojan War wasn't just legend, it was plausible history. The Mycenaeans weren't shadowy figures, they were meticulous administrators with thriving economies. And Ventris, he published his findings not in a stuffy journal, but on a BBC radio broadcast, humbly crediting the work of others before him. Tragically, he'd never see the full impact of his discovery. He died 4 years later in a car crash at 34. Today, those boring inventories are gold mines. They mention goddesses like Athena centuries before her worship appeared in classical texts, hinting at religious continuity across eras. They detail perfume workshops and bronze smiths, painting a vibrant picture of trade networks stretching from Egypt to the Baltic. Most hauntingly, some tablets found at Pylos speak of watchers by the sea, possibly sentinels reporting the very invasions that would obliterate their world. Ventris didn't just crack a code, he gave voice to a society on the brink, whose last written words weren't epic poetry, but a frantic tally of resources before the darkness fell. One scorching day in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ed-Di Hib tossed a rock into a cave near the Dead Sea, hoping to scare out a stray goat. Instead, the sound of shattering pottery echoed back. What he found inside would ignite the greatest manuscript hunt of the 20th century. Clay jars filled with crumbling leather scrolls, their edges blackened with age. At first, the boy thought they might be worthless, even considering using the ancient leather for sandal straps. But these weren't just old texts. They were a time capsule, preserved for 2,000 years in the desert's dry stillness, waiting to rewrite history. The scrolls quickly became the prize in a high-stakes race between scholars and antiquities dealers. Some fragments traded hands for bags of coins, while others were smuggled in shopping baskets through war-torn Jerusalem. By the time archaeologists intervened, they were piecing together a library of over 900 manuscripts, psalms, laws, even mysterious sectarian texts from a Jewish community that had vanished without a trace. Among them, one scroll stood out, the Great Isaiah. Nearly 23 feet long and flawlessly preserved, it contained the entire book of Isaiah in elegant Hebrew script, lettered on 17 sheets of parchment stitched together. Unrolling it was like staring into the eyes of a prophet, every word identical to the version chanted in synagogues today, proving the staggering accuracy of scribes who'd copied it across centuries. Yet the real magic happened in the shadows. Some scrolls were so damaged they looked like charred lace, their ink faded to near invisibility. That's when scientists turned to infrared cameras, a trick borrowed from World War II aerial reconnaissance. Under infrared light, letters drowned out by time suddenly blazed back to life. One fragment, previously blank, revealed a lost psalm. Another showed corrections scribbled in the margins, proof that even then, editors were fussing over every word. The scrolls didn't just preserve scripture, they shattered assumptions. They proved the Hebrew Bible wasn't fixed in stone but evolved through debate. They hinted at a radical sect, possibly the Essenes, who'd turned their backs on Jerusalem, waiting for apocalypse in the desert. And they raised haunting questions. Who hid these scrolls? Were they fleeing Roman armies during the Great Revolt? Were they trying to protect their library, or were these the last words of a doomed community? The Dead Sea Scrolls don't just connect us to the past, they whisper its urgent, unfinished mysteries. Most books don't survive fire, but the Dresden Codex, a fragile, accordion-folded bark paper manuscript painted in vibrant blues and reds, did more than survive. It outsmarted destruction. When Spanish bishops in the 16th century ordered the burning of thousands of Maya texts, denouncing them as pagan devilry, this codex slipped through the cracks, whisked away to Europe as a curiosity. By pure luck, it landed in the Royal Library of Dresden, where centuries later, a mild-mannered librarian named Ernst Fürstemann would crack its celestial secrets wide open. At first glance, the codex looked like an art piece, 69 pages adorned with gods, jaguars, and twisting serpent motifs. But Fürstemann noticed something odd: columns of numbers, each meticulously calculated, marching alongside the illustrations. He became obsessed, spending nights comparing the sequences to known astronomical cycles. Then came his eureka moment. The numbers matched the orbit of Venus with eerie precision. Not just approximate predictions, mathematically flawless charts tracking Venus's movements over decades, including its rare transitions as both the morning and evening star. The Maya hadn't just observed the heavens, they'd mastered time itself, condensing cosmic patterns into ink and bark. What makes this discovery spine-tingling is the sheer ambition behind it. Without telescopes or modern tools, Maya scribes calculated Venus's synodic period, the time it takes to realign with Earth, down to a variance of just 2 hours every 500 years. They did this not for navigation but for war. In Maya cosmology, Venus's appearances dictated auspicious battle dates, and their rulers planned campaigns around its cycles. The codex even includes correction pages, like a celestial cheat sheet, ensuring their calendar stayed in sync with the cosmos. Today, digital animations let us unfold the codex virtually, revealing its intricate layers. One section shows the rain god Chok wielding axes, summoning storms timed to astronomical events. Another depicts the dreaded Star War symbol, a glyph marking battles synchronized with Venus's rise. But perhaps most haunting are the burned edges on some pages, silent witnesses to the cultural genocide the codex narrowly escaped. Firsterman's decipherment didn't just recover lost knowledge, it forced the world to confront a truth colonialism tried to erase, that indigenous science was centuries ahead of Europe's. The Dresden Codex isn't merely a book, it's a rebellion in bark and pigment, proving some voices can't be silenced, even by fire. The Voynich manuscript doesn't just defy translation, it mocks it. Tucked away in Yale University's Beinecke Library, this 200-page puzzle from the 15th century is a riot of bizarre illustrations. Plants that don't exist, zodiac wheels with naked women bathing in celestial tubes, and endless paragraphs of flowing, alien script that not even top cryptographers have fully cracked. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or Linear B, there's no bilingual text here, no cheat sheet, just a book that seems to taunt every expert who dares to claim they've solved it. But in 2019, a team of computer scientists threw artificial intelligence at the problem, and for the first time, the manuscript's secrets flickered into view. The AI didn't just analyze patterns, it treated the manuscript like a game of linguistic Sudoku. Researchers fed it hundreds of languages, from medieval Latin to obscure dialects, training it to spot hidden structures. The breakthrough came when the algorithm detected something startling. The script's word order resembled Hebrew encrypted with alphagram substitution, a cipher where letters are shuffled into alphabetical order. Suddenly, phrases like "she spoke to the priest" and "farmer of the fields" emerged from the chaos. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was the first plausible key in 600 years. Yet the Voynich still guards its secrets fiercely. Those uncanny plants, some match medieval herbal guides, but others seem plucked from a fever dream, roots shaped like human organs, leaves with eyes. The zodiac section, with its surreal green nymphs, might be an astrological guide or an alchemist's notebook. Even the AI's Hebrew theory leaves gaps. Entire sections resist translation, and skeptics argue the algorithm could be seeing patterns in randomness. What's undeniable is the manuscript's allure. Carbon dated to between 1404 and 1438, it passed through the hands of emperors, rogue booksellers, and even a Jesuit scholar who supposedly cracked it, then took the secret to his grave. Today, amateur sleuths flood online forums with theories, from elaborate hoaxes to lost feminist texts. But perhaps the truth lies in the very strangeness of the book. Maybe it wasn't meant to be fully understood. Maybe, like a medieval Dadaist experiment, it exists to remind us that not all mysteries yield to logic, some just dare us to keep looking. The Phaistos disc isn't just an artifact, it's an ancient middle finger to modern decipherment. Unearthed in 1908 in the ruins of a Minoan palace on Crete, this 6-inch clay disc stares back at researchers with its cryptic spiral of 45 distinct symbols, stamped in perfect sequence like some Bronze Age typewriter experiment. Dated to around 1700 BC, it predates the Trojan War by centuries, yet its message remains as stubbornly mute as the day it was found. And here's the kicker, it's one of a kind. No other example of this script has ever been discovered, leaving scholars to argue whether it's a sacred hymn, an astronomical guide, or even the rulebook for a forgotten board game. What makes the disc so maddening is its craftsmanship. Unlike hand-carved inscriptions, these symbols were pressed into wet clay with individual stamps, a printing technique centuries ahead of its time. Each pictograph feels deliberate: a helmeted head, a bird mid-flight, a fish, even what looks like a beehive. They march in tight spirals from the disk's edge to its center, a design so precise it rules out randomness. Early excavators assumed translation would be swift. Then reality hit. Without a bilingual text or even a fragment of matching script, every proposed solution, and there have been over 120 crashes against the same wall, no reference point. Some theories dazzle with creativity. One linguist proposed it's a prayer to the mother goddess, with symbols representing syllables in a lost Minoan dialect. Another team ran statistical analysis, claiming the patterns match lunar cycles, turning the disk into an agricultural calendar. Then there's the board game camp, who point to similar spiral motifs on Egyptian game boards, suggesting the symbols mark moves or penalties. But the wildest theory, that it's not writing at all but a fabric pattern, an ancient stamp for decorating textiles, its meaning purely decorative. Recent tech has only deepened the mystery. High-resolution scans reveal microscopic fingerprints in the clay, proving the stamps were reused, hinting at a broader writing system lost to time. Yet for all our tools, the disk guards its secrets like the Minotaur in its labyrinth. Maybe that's the point. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved. They're reminders of how much we've yet to learn. The Phaistos disk doesn't just challenge our knowledge, it humbles it, whispering across millennia that not every voice from the past wishes to be heard. Buried beneath the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, tiny soapstone seals no bigger than postage stamps taunt modern scholars with their cryptic messages. Carved over 4,000 years ago by scribes of the Indus Valley civilization, these intricate artifacts feature elegant pictographs: an elephant here, a fish there, geometric shapes arranged in neat rows. At first glance, they seem simple, but here's the catch: after a century of study, no one has definitively cracked their code. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, the Indus script refuses to yield its secrets, making it the oldest undeciphered writing system on Earth. And the very things that make it fascinating, its brevity and isolation, are what keep it locked away. Most inscriptions contain just 4 or 5 symbols, some barely longer than a single character. Imagine trying to decode modern English if the only surviving examples were fragments like J.M. Co. or EST 18. Without lengthier texts or a Rosetta Stone style bilingual inscription, linguists are left playing a high-stakes game of Scrabble with half the tiles missing. Some argue it's not even writing at all, just proto-symbols used for trade markings. But the precision of the symbols, over 400 distinct signs, some repeating across vast distances, suggests a sophisticated system, possibly syllabic or even logo-syllabic like early Chinese scripts. The debate rages on, with computer algorithms now mapping symbol frequencies, hunting for grammatical patterns invisible to the human eye. One theory suggests the seals weren't meant for literature or laws, but for commerce. Found near ancient warehouses, many bear impressions of twisted fiber, hinting they were pressed onto bales of cloth or bundles of grain. The fish sign might denote a merchant family, while the stick figure could be a numeral. But without context, even that's speculative. Recent breakthroughs, like a proposed connection to the ancient Dravidian language family, offer glimmers of hope, yet the script's resistance to translation has become its defining trait. What's haunting is how close we are to losing its meaning forever. The Indus people left no known descendants, their cities abandoned by 1800 BC, possibly due to climate shifts. Their seals, though durable, carry messages that may now be irrevocably silent. Yet every failed attempt to crack them teaches us something new about the fragility of knowledge, the limits of our tools, and the stubborn beauty of a puzzle that refuses to surrender. Some scripts aren't just codes to be broken, they're mirrors reflecting back how much we still don't know. The Rohunk Codex doesn't just baffle linguists, it taunts them with the audacity of its deception. Discovered in the early 19th century in Hungary, this 200-page manuscript is a visual paradox. delicate Christian illustrations, crucifixions, saints, even the Last Supper, paired with columns of symbols unlike any known alphabet. At first glance, it seemed like a lost gospel or a secret devotional text, but the more scholars studied it, the more they realized something was deeply wrong. The symbols didn't follow grammatical rules, the ink didn't match the paper's age, and the illustrations suspiciously generic, like a forger's idea of what ancient should look like. Then in 2018, a team of Hungarian researchers dropped a bombshell. This wasn't a cipher waiting to be cracked. It was an elaborate 16th century prank, a hoax stitched together from invented scribbles and stolen runes. What makes the codex so fascinating isn't just its fakeness, it's how convincingly it wore the mask of authenticity. The script borrows from at least 15 different writing systems, Greek letters flipped upside down, medieval Hungarian runes twisted into nonsense, even snippets of old Turkic script tossed in like seasoning. Some pages feature what look like numbers, but they don't add up literally. One line might repeat the same word 10 times, then switch abruptly to a jumble of symbols with no discernible pattern. It's as if the creator wanted to mimic the rhythm of language without the burden of meaning. The illustrations sealed the deal. Under ultraviolet light, researchers noticed something peculiar. The paint pigments matched those used in 16th century European art, not early medieval manuscripts. Worse, the depictions of biblical scenes were riddled with errors. One image showed a saint holding a cross backward. Another had a crowd of people wearing anachronistic hats. These weren't the mistakes of a pious scribe, they were the telltale signs of someone improvising. Yet the codex's backstory is almost too perfect. It first appeared in the library of a Hungarian count in the 1830s, just as Europe was obsessed with decoding ancient scripts. Was it a money-making scheme, a nationalist ploy to fabricate a Hungarian Rosetta Stone, or maybe a bored scholar's idea of a joke left to spiral out of control? The truth might never be known, but one thing's certain: the Rohank Codex is a masterpiece of mischief, a reminder that not every ancient-looking book is a portal to the past. Sometimes it's just a really good con. The Liber Linteus shouldn't exist, not as we know it. Woven from delicate linen and scrawled with elegant Etruscan script around 200 BC, this ancient book's survival hinged on a twist so bizarre it feels like fiction. Someone cut it into strips and used it to wrap a mummy. Not in Etruria, where it was written, but in Egypt, where it lay swaddled around a woman's corpse for centuries until a 19th century collector peeled it apart and realized the bandages weren't just cloth, they were pages. 12 feet of them, painstakingly reassembled into the longest Etruscan text ever found. What makes this manuscript so electrifying isn't just its improbable journey, it's the glaring irony. The Etruscans, a civilization that dominated Italy before Rome, left behind thousands of inscriptions, yet almost none of their literature survives. Their language, unrelated to any major European family, was already fading when Romans absorbed their culture. Most Etruscan texts we have are short funerary epitaphs, temple dedications, or metalwork signatures. But the Liber Linteus, it's different. Its columns of red and black ink detail elaborate rituals, prayers to gods like Uni, their version of Juno, and Tinia, their Zeus, instructions for sacrifices, even celestial observations. It's a liturgical guidebook, a rare window into a religion Rome deliberately erased. Yet the window remains frustratingly foggy. Of the 1,200 words deciphered, many repeat in formulaic sequences, leaving scholars to guess at context. One passage might list offerings, wine, honey, cheese, or while another describes a procession, possibly tied to the lunar calendar. But without a bilingual key or living descendants of the language, even these fragments feel like eavesdropping on a conversation where every other word is muffled. The bigger mystery, how it ended up in Egypt. Some speculate an Etruscan mercenary or trader brought it, only for locals to repurpose its exotic fabric. Others think it was looted during Rome's conquests, discarded as worthless until an enterprising embalmer saw high-quality linen. Whatever the truth, the Liber Linteus is a double ghost, a text preserved by the culture that destroyed its meaning, whispering across millennia in a language almost no one alive can fully understand. It's not just a book, it's a paradox wrapped in a mummy, daring us to unravel its secrets. High on a windswept plateau near Lhasa, a 9-foot-tall stone pillar stands as a silent witness to one of the most delicate diplomatic dances in ancient history. Carved in 822 AD, the Sino-Tibetan Treaty Pillar isn't just a monument, it's a linguistic time capsule. Its surface etched with the same peace treaty in 2 languages, elegant Chinese characters on one side and swirling Old Tibetan script on the other. For centuries, wind and rain wore at its inscriptions, threatening to erase a pivotal moment when 2 empires teetered between war and truce. But when scholars finally pieced together its bilingual puzzle, they didn't just recover a forgotten ceasefire, they unlocked the sound of a language lost for 1,000 years. The pillar's story begins with a bloody stalemate. After decades of border clashes between Tibet's expansive empire and China's Tang dynasty, both sides were exhausted. The treaty, negotiated near the holy site of Lhasa, promised mutual respect, no more raids, no more territorial claims, and most strikingly, a pledge to treat each other's envoys like brothers. But what makes this pillar extraordinary isn't just its politics, it's the precision of its parallel texts. Every clause, every title, even the names of officials were meticulously mirrored in both languages, creating a Rosetta Stone for Old Tibetan. Before its discovery, scholars relied on garbled Sanskrit translations to guess at Tibetan pronunciation. Now they had exact phonetic equivalents carved in stone by scribes who knew both tongues fluently. Deciphering it wasn't easy. The Tibetan script, adapted from Indian Brahmi, had evolved dramatically by the 19th century, leaving its ancient form nearly unrecognizable. Early epigraphers squinted at weathered glyphs, trying to match phrases like "Great King" or "Borderlands" across the 2 columns. The breakthrough came when they noticed how Tibetan scribes translated Chinese honorifics. For example, the Tang Emperor's title, Son of Heaven, became La Esros in Tibetan, literally divine heir, revealing not just vocabulary but cultural nuance. Suddenly, lines from Tibetan Buddhist texts, previously mute on pronunciation, could be read aloud with confidence, but the pillar's real magic lies in its gaps. Where the Chinese text speaks loftily of eternal harmony, the Tibetan version adds pragmatic details, trade routes to be reopened, hostages exchanged, even a clause forbidding the harboring of fugitive livestock. It's a reminder that even grand diplomacy hinges on mundane concerns. Today, digital scans preserve every stroke of the pillar's fading script, but its legacy is louder than ever. Those carved words didn't just end a war, they gave back a voice to a civilization, proving that sometimes peace leaves behind more than just silence. The Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island aren't just artifacts, they're a silent scream from a civilization on the brink. Carved into weathered wooden planks, these intricate glyphs spiral like tangled vines, their symbols depicting everything from crouching men to eerie, beak-faced birds. For over a century, scholars have wrestled with their meaning, some dismissing them as mere decorations, others convinced they hold the last words of the Rapa Nui people before ecological collapse swallowed their world. But in 2019, a team of linguists and astronomers made a startling claim. These weren't random carvings, they were a complex writing system, and hidden within them lay lunar calendars so precise they could predict eclipses, and chants so sacred they might recount the island's very creation. What makes Rongorongo so tantalizing is its isolation. Most Polynesian cultures relied solely on oral tradition, with no known writing systems before European contact. Yet here, on the most remote inhabited island on Earth, was a script bursting with sophistication. The glyphs weren't scratched haphazardly, they followed a strict reverse Boustrophedon pattern, meaning each line flipped direction, with symbols themselves upside down every other row like a serpentine dance across the wood. Early missionaries reported that elderly islanders could recite the tablets by heart in the 19th century, suggesting the glyphs served as memory aids for spoken performances. But within decades, slave raids and smallpox erased those voices, leaving the tablets mute. Recent breakthroughs hinge on two tablets in particular, the Mamre and Aruku Kurenga. Using statistical analysis, researchers noticed clusters of glyphs repeating at consistent intervals 29.5 days apart, matching the lunar cycle. One sequence shows a fish glyph followed by a crescent, possibly marking peak fishing times tied to moon phases. Another, the so-called chant tablet, features a recurring trio, a bird, a canoe, and a palm tree. To outsiders, it's cryptic, but to Rapa Nui descendants, these symbols echo oral traditions of Hotu Matar, the legendary founder who sailed to the island following celestial signs. The real controversy lies in whether Rongorongo truly constitutes writing. Some linguists argue it's proto-writing, a bridge between art and alphabet where symbols represent concepts but not specific words or sounds. Others point to glyphs that resemble the Rongorongo chant used in traditional birdman ceremonies, suggesting the tablets encoded ritual knowledge. Carbon dating adds another twist. The oldest tablets might predate European contact, debunking theories that islanders copied writing from Spanish visitors. What's heartbreaking is how close we came to understanding. In the 1860s, a French bishop, horrified by the tablet's pagan content, ordered hundreds burned. Only 26 survive, scattered in museums from Vienna to Santiago. Today, 3D scanning and AI pattern recognition offer new hope, but the Rapa Nui themselves guard their heritage fiercely. Some elders argue the tablet's meanings are sacred, not meant for outsiders. Others see decipherment as resurrection, a chance to reclaim a voice silenced by colonialism. One thing's certain, these grooves in wood aren't just marks. They're a civilization's last stand against oblivion, whispering across the waves that memory, even when fractured, never truly dies. The Proto-Elamite tablets aren't just ancient ledgers, they're a 4,000-year-old mathematical labyrinth with no exit. Unearthed in the ruins of Susa, Iran, these 5,000 clay rectangles, dating back to 3100 BC, bear the distinction of being the world's oldest undeciphered writing system, predating even the earliest cuneiform. At first glance, they look like bureaucratic drudgery, columns of numbers, crude animal sketches, and repetitive symbols scratched into wet clay. But peel back the surface and the mystery deepens. These aren't just records of grain or livestock. They're the remains of a lost administrative language, one that thrived for just 2 centuries before vanishing without a trace, leaving behind a code that defies every modern decipherment tactic. What makes these tablets so infuriating isn't just their age, it's their stubborn refusal to follow linguistic rules. Unlike later Elamite cuneiform, which scholars eventually cracked, Proto-Elamite shares no clear ties to any known language family. Its symbols seem to dance between pictographs and abstract notation, with no obvious grammar or word order. Some signs reappear across tablets like clockwork. A circle with a cross might denote sheep, while a zigzag could mean barley. But without a bilingual text or even a recognizable numeral system, every theory hits a wall. Early attempts to treat it as proto-cuneiform failed spectacularly. The signs share visual similarities but function entirely differently. One scholar compared it to trying to read a grocery list written in emojis if half the emojis had meanings only the original author understood. The numerical system is its own nightmare. Proto-Elamite math relies on a sexagesimal base 60 structure like later Babylonian systems, but with bewildering twists. The same symbol might represent 10 in one context and 60 in another, depending on placement. Some tablets feature columns of numbers with no apparent totals, suggesting they were works in progress or used a calculation method we've yet to grasp. Even more puzzling, the tablets show evidence of erasures and corrections, as if the scribes themselves were refining their system as they worked. This wasn't static record-keeping, it was a living, evolving experiment in early bureaucracy. Recent technology has only deepened the enigma. High-resolution 3D scans reveal microscopic impressions, fingerprints of scribes, the angle of their stylus strokes, even the order in which signs were pressed into the clay. One team discovered that certain tablets were etched by multiple hands, hinting at a trained scribble class. Another found that the tablet's clay sources varied widely, suggesting a decentralized network of record keepers across the Elamite realm. But the biggest clue might be what's missing. Later Elamite texts, after 3100 BC, Proto-Elamite vanishes abruptly, replaced by a 200-year gap before cuneiform reappears. Was the system abandoned because it was too complex? Did an invasion or drought scatter its practitioners? Or was it never meant to last, a temporary bridge between oral tradition and true writing? The tablets don't just taunt us with their silence, they challenge our assumptions about how writing evolved. Most scripts develop linearly, from pictographs to abstract letters. Proto-Elamite zigzags, its symbols flickering between representation and abstraction without clear progression. Some researchers argue it wasn't a full writing system at all, but a proto-writing hybrid, part mnemonic aid, part accounting tool, never intended to convey spoken language. Others see it as a dead end, a brilliant but unsustainable experiment snuffed out by its own complexity. One thing's certain, every failed decipherment teaches us something new about the fragility of human communication. These clay rectangles aren't just records, they're cautionary tales. A reminder that even the most meticulous systems can turn to dust, their meanings dissolving into the very earth they were pressed upon. And perhaps that's their real lesson. Not every cipher exists to be broken. Some are just echoes whispering across millennia that some doors stay closed. Buried beneath the still waters of a northern Greek lake, the Deciphered tablet lies at the heart of an archaeological firestorm. Discovered in 1993 during excavations of a Neolithic lakeside settlement, this rectangular slab of wood, carbon dated to around 5200 BC, bears a series of carefully incised symbols that look eerily deliberate. To some, these markings represent Europe's oldest known writing system, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by over a millennium. To others, they're nothing more than scratches, random grooves left by tools or weathering. But if the symbols are genuine, they could rewrite the entire history of literacy, proving that complex communication systems blossomed far earlier and far farther west than anyone ever imagined. What sets the Deciphered tablet apart isn't just its age, it's the context. Found among the remains of a stilt house village, the tablet lay preserved in the oxygen-deprived mud of Lake Castoria, its wood miraculously intact after 7,000 years. Surrounding artifacts, pottery, tools, animal bones paint a picture of a thriving agricultural community. But the symbols themselves steal the spotlight. Rows of angular lines, branching shapes, and looping forms arranged in a way that feels too structured to be accidental. Some resemble later Greek letters, like a backward E or a rudimentary A, while others defy comparison, their meanings lost to time. The controversy hinges on a fundamental question: are these marks proto-writing or just proto-doodles? Supporters of the writing theory point to the tablet's deliberate layout, symbols grouped in clusters, some repeated in sequences that suggest a coded message. They argue that early Neolithic societies, with their complex trade networks and crop cycles, had every reason to develop record-keeping systems independent of the Near East. Detractors counter that without multiple examples or a bilingual key, the symbols could be ownership marks, ritual carvings, or even an ancient artisan's idle practice. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or Behistun inscription, there's no bilingual text here, no cheat sheet to unlock the code. recent research has only fueled the debate. Spectrographic analysis confirms the symbols were carved in a single session, ruling out gradual wear. The depth and uniformity of the grooves suggest a sharp tool wielded with precision, not haphazard scratching. But the clincher might lie in the tablet's backside, where faint, previously unnoticed markings seem to mirror the front, as if someone was experimenting with symmetry. Could this be the work of a Neolithic scribe or just a bored villager passing time? The implications are staggering. If the Decyphred tablet is genuine proto-writing, it means literacy didn't spread slowly westward from Mesopotamia. It sprouted independently across Europe, only to be forgotten and reinvented millennia later. It would place the roots of European writing not in clay or stone, but in the forests and lake shores of the Neolithic world. Yet until another matching artifact surfaces, the tablet remains a tantalizing outlier, a whisper from a time before history, daring us to listen. Imagine stumbling upon a discarded shopping list only to realize it's nearly 1,000 years old. That's exactly what happened in 1951, when construction workers digging in Novgorod, Russia, unearthed the first of what would become over 1,000 birch bark letters. These fragile strips of bark, preserved for centuries in the city's waterlogged soil, weren't grand proclamations or royal decrees. They were the text messages of medieval Russia, scrawled in haste, folded tight, and tossed into the mud like ancient trash. But their very ordinariness makes them extraordinary. Here, etched into bark with a stylus or even a fingernail, lies the raw, unfiltered voice of everyday people from the 11th to 15th centuries. What makes these letters so revolutionary is how they shatter the polished facade of history. Before their discovery, our understanding of medieval ruse came almost entirely from formal texts, religious manuscripts, legal codes, and chronicles written in lofty church Slavonic, a language as stiff and ceremonial as Latin was in Western Europe. But the birch bark letters, they're alive with slang, misspellings, and raw emotion. A merchant nags his brother for forgetting to send hemp. A woman named Gostiota angrily demands her stolen cloak back. There's even a child's practice alphabet complete with wobbly letters and a crude drawing of a warrior, proving that 11th century school days were as tedious and distractible as modern ones. The most heart-wrenching find might be the love letters. On one strip, a man named Mikita pleads with his sweetheart Anna, "Marry me, I want you and you want me." Another reveals a bitter breakup. "You sent me a letter saying I'm done with you. Really? Was I the one who abandoned you?" These aren't poetic verses from a chronicle, they're real heartbeats preserved in bark, proving that human nature hasn't changed much in 900 years. Linguists treasure these scraps for another reason. They capture the spoken vernacular of the time. Church Slavonic was the domain of priests and scribes, but the letters reveal a dynamic, evolving language Proto-Russian, peppered with dialect words and grammatical shortcuts. Some letters even mix Slavonic with Finnic or Norse terms, reflecting Novgorod's role as a bustling trade hub. One merchant's note casually drops a Norse word for ship, while another complains about a debtor using a Finnic term for interest. This was a multilingual world where bureaucracy and bartering demanded flexibility, not formality. Preservation is its own miracle. Novgorod's acidic, oxygen-poor soil acted like a time capsule, preventing the bark from rotting. Many letters were found still folded, their creases sharp as if the sender had just tucked them away. Some bear traces of wax seals, others were clearly torn open in haste. A few were even reused, scratched out and rewritten, like a medieval version of hitting delete on a draft. Today, these humble scraps are rewriting history textbooks. They prove that literacy wasn't confined to monasteries. Women, children, and craftsmen all penned letters. They show that medieval Russians cracked jokes, squabbled over money, and pined for lost love just like us. Most importantly, they remind us that history isn't just made by kings and battles. Sometimes it's etched in bark by a child's clumsy hand or a lover's desperate plea, whispers from the past that refuse to stay silent. The Ugaritic tablets don't just unlock an ancient alphabet, they tear open a window into the stormy world of gods, kings, and prophets that shaped the Hebrew Bible. Unearthed in 1929 at the ruins of Ugarit, a bustling Canaanite port city in modern-day Syria, these clay tablets looked like yet another batch of cuneiform at first glance. But when French archaeologist Claude Schiffer brushed away the dust, he noticed something electrifying. The wedge-shaped symbols weren't representing syllables like Babylonian or Assyrian cuneiform. They were letters, 27 of them, forming the world's earliest known alphabetic script adapted to cuneiform's angular style. This wasn't just writing. It was a Rosetta Stone for the religious imagination of the ancient Near East. Deciphering them should have taken decades. Instead, it took months. Unlike undeciphered scripts with no linguistic relatives, Ugaritic was a close cousin to Hebrew, Aramaic, and Phoenician. Scholars recognized familiar words immediately: MLK for king, BN for son, even the name El, the high god of Canaanite pantheons. But the real treasure lay in the tablet's content. These weren't dry tax records. They were vivid myths, hymns, and rituals dedicated to Baal, the storm god whose battles with sea monsters and death itself eerily mirrored later biblical themes. One tablet describes Baal's palace being built with cedar from Lebanon, the same phrasing used in the Bible for Solomon's temple. Another recounts his victory over Yam, the sea god, echoing Psalm 74's depiction of Yahweh, breaking the heads of the dragons in the waters. The parallels sent shockwaves through biblical studies. Suddenly, phrases once thought unique to Hebrew scripture had precedence in Canaanite poetry. The famous "Holy, Holy, Holy" of Isaiah's vision, Ugaritic priests described Baal the same way. The sons of God in Genesis, Ugarit called divine beings Ben Ilm. Even the name Yahweh might share roots with a Ugaritic verb meaning to create or to command. This wasn't plagiarism, it was cultural conversation, proof that Israel's faith didn't emerge in a vacuum but wrestled with the stories of its neighbors. Yet Ugarit's greatest gift wasn't just linguistic. The tablets shattered stereotypes of Canaanite religion as mere idol worship. Their rituals were meticulous, their theology sophisticated. One text describes El, the aging high god, as father of years, presiding over a divine council like a Near Eastern Olympus. Another, the legend of Keret, blends epic poetry with moral lessons, a grieving king's quest for heirs that mirrors Abraham's plight. Most haunting is the tale of Akhat, a mortal gifted a divine bow only to be murdered for it, his sister vowing vengeance in a narrative that feels ripped from Greek tragedy. The city's sudden destruction around 1200 BC adds a layer of irony. Ugarit scribes never lived to see their alphabet simplified into Phoenician script, the ancestor of Greek, Latin, and our own letters. But their words survived, buried under ash until Schiffer's team unearthed them just as European scholars were debating the Bible's cultural context. Today, those clay fragments force us to confront a messy, vibrant past where gods borrowed epithets, kings sought divine favor, and poets penned verses so powerful they transcended empires. The Ugaritic tablets don't just decode an alphabet, they reveal the living, breathing world behind the scriptures, one where every stroke of the stylus was a bridge between earth and heaven. The La Mojara Stela doesn't just stand in a Mexican jungle, it practically dares you to decode it. Carved in the 2nd century AD, this 6-foot-tall slab of volcanic rock is a masterpiece of Epi-Olmec script, a writing system so enigmatic that for over a century, scholars could only stare at its swirling glyphs and guess. Unlike Maya hieroglyphs, which share some visual elements, Epi-Olmec refused to yield to familiar methods. Then in 1993, linguists John Justison and Terence Kaufman dropped a bombshell. Those weren't arbitrary symbols. They were syllables from a mixed Zoquian language, spoken by descendants of the Olmecs, the very civilization that may have birthed writing in the Americas. What makes this decipherment so groundbreaking is how it rewrote the rules. The Stella's text isn't just a list of kings or conquests, it's a dramatic narrative blending politics, astronomy, and divine intervention. The protagonist, a ruler named Harvester Mountain Lord, whose reign was nearly toppled by rebellion until a celestial omen turned the tide. One passage describes a solar eclipse, likely the one visible over La Mojara on April 10th, 154 AD, interpreted as the god's fury against his enemies. The glyph for darkness shows a sun disk swallowed by a serpent, a metaphor so vivid it chills the blood. The key to cracking the code lay in an unexpected place, a hand-sized ceramic mask called the Tuxtla statuette, inscribed with similar glyphs. Justison and Kaufman noticed repeating patterns combinations that likely represented syllables like pa or ku, and cross-referenced them with reconstructed mixed Zoquian vocabulary. The word for ruler, for instance, matched the term Ajor in related languages. Slowly, the Stella's story emerged: Harvester Mountain Lord's rise, the betrayal by his half-brother, and his triumphant return aided by supernatural signs. But the real shocker, the sophistication of the writing. Epi-Olmec isn't just pictographs, it's a logosyllabic system, combining whole word symbols with phonetic complements to clarify pronunciation. Take the glyph for blood. It's not just a drop. It's a drop plus a tiny chi sign to specify the word start. This level of nuance suggests the script had centuries of development before the Stela was carved, hinting at lost libraries of Mesoamerican literature. The aftermath of this discovery rippled far beyond academia. Suddenly, murals at sites like Teotihuacan gained new context. Pottery fragments with brief glyphs became potential historical records. Most poignant is the realization that mixed Zoquian speakers today, fewer than 200,000, are the linguistic heirs of the Olmecs, their ancestors' voices echoing through a stone that refused to stay silent. The La Mojara Stela isn't just a monument, it's a revolution in clay and basalt, proving that even the most stubborn scripts can't hide forever. The Tartaria tablets don't just push the boundaries of early writing, they smash them entirely. Unearthed in 1961 at a Neolithic site in Romania, these three small clay tablets, dating back to 5300 BC, are etched with strange, looping symbols that look eerily deliberate. To some scholars, these markings represent the world's oldest known writing system, predating Sumerian proto-cuneiform by over 1,000 years. To others, they're nothing more than ritual scribbles, sacred doodles with no linguistic meaning. But one thing's certain: if these symbols are writing, they rewrite human history, proving that the urge to record language didn't begin in Mesopotamia but in the forests of the Balkans. What makes these tablets so controversial isn't just their age, it's their isolation. The symbols belong to the Vinča culture, a sophisticated Neolithic society that stretched across southeastern Europe, known for its sprawling settlements and intricate pottery. But unlike Mesopotamian proto-cuneiform, which evolved steadily into full-blown writing, Vinča symbols appear fully formed, then vanish without a trace. No gradual development, no later texts, just these mysterious tablets buried alongside human bones, as if meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Some symbols resemble later writing systems: a branching tree, a zigzag that could be water, even something like a stick figure. But without context or repetition across multiple sites, deciphering them is like trying to read a single page torn from a library of burnt books. The debate hinges on a single question: are these marks proto-writing symbols that convey meaning but don't represent spoken language, or true writing capable of encoding complex ideas? Supporters of the writing theory point to the tablet's deliberate groupings, symbols clustered in lines, some repeated in sequences that suggest syntax. One tablet even shows a grid-like arrangement, echoing later accounting tablets from Sumer. Could these be trade records, owner's marks, or even early religious texts? Critics fire back that without a bilingual key or longer inscriptions, the symbols could just as easily be ritualistic, like the cryptic signs on a shaman's drum. The Sumerian comparison adds fuel to the fire. Proto-cuneiform began as pictographs around 3400 BC, starting as simple tallies for grain and livestock before evolving into abstract script. Vincher symbols, by contrast, appear suddenly, and unlike cuneiform, they never clearly evolve into anything else. This has led some to argue they weren't meant to record speech at all, but to signal identity or status, like a signature or clan emblem. Yet recent discoveries of similar symbols on spindle walls and figurines across the Balkans hint at a broader system, one possibly used by women in textile production. A radical idea that challenges the traditional male scribe narrative of early writing. The most tantalizing clue might lie in the tablets' burial. Found in a ritual pit alongside a skeleton, their placement suggests they held power beyond mere record-keeping. One theory proposes they were oracle tablets, objects imbued with magical meaning, their symbols acting as conduits to the spirit world. Another suggests they were funerary tokens, meant to guide the dead or mark their belongings. But until more tablets surface or someone cracks the code, their true purpose remains locked in clay. What's undeniable is their haunting beauty. These symbols weren't scratched carelessly, they were carved with precision, the curves and angles echoing motifs found on Vincher pottery and figurines. Some researchers have tried linking them to later Danube scripts or even the linear of Minoan Crete, but no direct lineage has been proven. Perhaps that's the real lesson of the Tartaria tablets. Not every ancient mark needs to be writing to matter. Whether they're the world's first words or just whispers of a lost ritual, they remind us that human communication is messy, mysterious, and far older than we ever imagined. The Meroitic script doesn't just borrow from Egyptian hieroglyphs, it flips them into something entirely new. Carved onto sandstone stelae and temple walls across ancient Nubia, these elegant symbols look deceptively familiar. A lion here, a vulture there, even the same coiled serpent that symbolized royalty in Egypt. But by the 2nd century BC, the scribes of Kush had repurposed these glyphs into a revolutionary writing system, one that abandoned hieroglyphs' logographic roots to create Africa's earliest known alphabetic script. For centuries, scholars assumed it was just a decorative offshoot of Egyptian writing, until linguists in the 1990s noticed something startling. Those weren't just pictures, they were sounds meticulously adapted to capture the rhythms of a language lost to time. Deciphering Meroitic became a linguistic high-stakes gamble. Unlike the Rosetta Stone's neat Greek-Egyptian parallel, Meroitic had no bilingual key, but there was a lifeline. The script came in two forms, hieroglyphic for royal inscriptions and a flowing cursive for everyday use, both using the same 23 phonetic signs. By comparing names of known Kushite kings and queens across texts, researchers began piecing together syllables. The lion glyph, it stood for A, the vulture. M, slowly, the lexicon of an empire emerged. Then came the bombshell. Translations of stelae from the royal city of Marae revealed something history had largely ignored: the military prowess of Candace's, Kush's warrior queens. One inscription from Queen Ammonina's reign describes a daring attack on Roman Egypt around 25 BC, her armies sacking the frontier city of Aswan and hauling back loot, including Augustus's bronze statues. The Romans called it a skirmish. The Meroitic texts, they framed it as divine retribution, with the queen's victories attributed to the lion god Apodamak. Another stele boasts of her successor, Amenishakito, leading cavalry charges against desert tribes, her triumphs etched alongside meticulous lists of captured livestock and gold. What's spine-tingling is how these translations rewrite colonial narratives. Greco-Roman historians dismissed Kush as a barbarian fringe barely worth mentioning. But the stelae paint a different picture, a sophisticated kingdom where women commanded armies, diplomats negotiated in Greek and Meroitic, and scribes recorded tax receipts in ink on pottery shards. Even the script itself hints at cultural defiance, using Egyptian symbols to assert independence from Egypt's shadow. Yet the script's full decipherment remains just out of reach. Without a living descendant language or a Rosetta-style breakthrough, many everyday texts, court documents, love letters, market lists stay mute. Infrared imaging has recently unveiled faded ink inscriptions on temple plaster, offering hope. But for now, Meroitic stands as both a triumph and a taunt, a writing system bold enough to challenge Rome, then vanish into the sands, leaving behind just enough to tease us with what we've yet to learn. The Cascajal block doesn't just sit in a museum, it dares us to rethink the birth of writing in the Americas. Weighing in at 12 pounds and roughly the size of a textbook, this serpentine slab, discovered in a gravel quarry in Veracruz, Mexico in the 1990s, is etched with 62 enigmatic symbols. Carbon dated to around 900 BC, it predates the oldest confirmed Maya writing by centuries, making it a contender for the oldest writing system in the New World. But here's where it gets thorny. The symbols aren't just random scratches. They're arranged in distinct rows, some repeating in patterns that scream intentionality, like a coded message from the Olmecs, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica. At first glance, the glyphs feel eerily familiar. A few bear a striking resemblance to later Maya hieroglyphs, a squiggly line that could be water, a profile that might mean Lord. Others are wholly unique, a butterfly with jagged wings, a cross-hatched rectangle like a woven mat. The block's discoverers, archaeologists Maria del Carmen Rodriguez and Ponciano Ortiz, argue these aren't mere doodles. The symbols cluster in grammatical-looking sequences, with some glyphs appearing only at the beginning or end of lines, suggesting syntax, not just art. If they're right, the Olmecs weren't just carving stone. They were encoding language centuries before their Maya successors, but not everyone's convinced. Critics point to the block's isolation. Unlike the La Mojara Stela or Maya codices, no other Olmec texts with matching symbols have been found. The glyphs appear nowhere else, not on pottery, not in caves, not even in the ruins of San Lorenzo, the Olmec heartland. Without a Rosetta Stone-like bilingual text or even a second example, the block's authenticity hangs in limbo. Some scholars suggest it could be a clever fake, though the quarry's undisturbed soil layers and the slab's weathering patterns tilt the scales toward legitimacy. Others propose a middle ground. Maybe it's proto-writing symbols with shared meaning, but not a full-fledged script like the Vinca symbols of Europe. The block's material adds another layer of intrigue. Serpentine wasn't just lying around Veracruz. It had to be hauled from the highlands, suggesting the slab was precious, possibly ritualistic. One theory posits it was a scribe's practice piece, erased and reused like a prehistoric etch-a-sketch. Another imagines it as a boundary marker or a trade ledger, its glyphs tallying goods like cacao or jade. The most tantalizing idea, that it's a fragment of a larger tradition, most of which was carved on perishable materials like wood or bark, lost to the jungle's humidity. Recent imaging techniques have only deepened the mystery. High-resolution scans reveal tool marks consistent with Olmec-era engraving methods, and the glyph's depth suggests multiple carving sessions, hints of a living document, not a one-off. Yet the debate rages on, fueled by nationalism, academic rivalries, and the sheer weight of what's at stake. If the Cascajal block is genuine, it means the Olmecs didn't just build colossal heads and trade networks. They invented a writing system that may have seeded every script that followed in Mesoamerica. And if it's not, it's still a masterpiece of ancient artistry, a Rorschach test in stone that challenges us to ask, how do we define writing and who gets to claim its origins? Either way, the block refuses to be ignored. Its silent glyphs a provocation across millennia. The Biblos syllabary isn't just a collection of ancient inscriptions, it's a linguistic tug of war between empires. Unearthed in the ruins of Byblos, Lebanon, between 1928 and 1932, these 18 enigmatic bronze and stone tablets from the 2nd millennium BC bear symbols that look tantalizingly familiar yet stubbornly opaque. At first glance, the glyphs flirt with recognition. Some echo early Egyptian hieroglyphs, others resemble the angular strokes of Proto-Canaanite, and a few even hint at the Phoenician alphabet that would revolutionize writing centuries later. But try to read them and the script slips through your fingers like smoke. What makes these inscriptions so electrifying is their historical sweet spot. Byblos was the beating heart of Mediterranean trade, a city where Egyptian pharaohs, Canaanite merchants, and Aegean sailors rubbed shoulders. The syllabary's symbols reflect this cultural cocktail hybrid, designs that borrow from neighboring traditions yet refuse to conform to any known system. One tablet shows a striking ox head nearly identical to Phoenician Aleph, while another features a looping water sign that mirrors Egyptian hieroglyphs. But string them together and the meaning dissolves. Early excavators hoped they'd found a missing link between hieroglyphs and alphabets, a Rosetta Stone for the Levant. Instead, they got a cryptogram wearing historical disguises. Decipherment attempts have swung between brilliance and frustration. In the 1940s, French scholar Maurice Dunn proposed the script was a syllabic adaptation of Egyptian, where symbols represented consonant-vowel pairs. His translations suggested royal dedications, kings boasting of temples built or enemies vanquished. But skeptics fired back. Without bilingual texts, Dunn's readings were educated guesses at best. Then came the Phoenician theory, championed by those who spotted proto-alphabetic patterns. If correct, it would mean Byblos scribes were experimenting with simplified writing centuries before Phoenician traders standardized their famous alphabet. The plot thickens with the undeciphered camp's counterargument. Maybe these aren't words at all. Some inscriptions are frustratingly short. Just 5 or 6 symbols, leading scholars like Giovanni Garbini to argue they're elaborate royal seals, not true writing. Picture a Bronze Age logo where a sequence of glyphs telegraphs a king's authority without spelling his name. Infrared scans reveal something curious, the symbol's depth and where patterns suggest repeated stamping, as if pressed into wax or clay to mark shipments of cedar wood, Byblos' most coveted export. Yet tantalizing clues keep hope alive. One bronze tablet, known as Byblos 7, features an unusually long sequence of glyphs arranged in neat line structure that feels too deliberate for mere ornamentation. Another bears a striking resemblance to later Cypriot syllabics, hinting at a forgotten maritime script network. Recent AI analysis has added fuel to the fire, identifying statistical patterns consistent with syllabic languages, though even algorithms stumble without a linguistic key. The Byblos syllabary's greatest gift might be its stubborn mystery. It forces us to confront how fluid writing's evolution truly was not a straight line from pictographs to alphabets, but a messy, creative explosion of experiments. Some scripts, like Phoenician, change the world. Others, like these cryptic symbols, remind us that not every innovation survives. But in their silence, they speak volumes about the human urge to invent, adapt, and above all, leave a mark. Hidden beneath the ruins of ancient Anatolia, the Phrygian curse tablets don't just whisper, they hiss with venom. Carved in the 1st century AD, these thin sheets of lead or bronze bear messages so visceral they make your skin crawl. Picture this: a craftsman in the bustling city of Hierapolis bends over a small metal rectangle, scratching out jagged Greek letters that spell a curse in a language long thought dead. The words aren't Greek, they're Neo-Phrygian, a defiant echo of a once great kingdom, now reduced to clandestine threats etched in metal, and the message: chillingly simple, whoever steals this cloak shall become blind, let their eyes rot like spoiled fruit. What makes these tablets so electrifying is their linguistic sleight of hand. At first glance, they look like ordinary Greek inscriptions, the same alphabet, the same curves and lines. but read them aloud and the syllables twist into something unrecognizable. This was a secret in plain sight, a conquered people using their oppressors' script to preserve their own tongue. The Phrygians, whose empire had crumbled under Persian and later Roman rule, clung to their identity through these underground outbursts. Some curses target thieves, others lovers who spurned someone's advances. One tablet from the temple of Cybele in Pessinus even invokes the mother goddess to bind the tongue of a rival in court, an ancient lawsuit settled not with evidence but with supernatural sabotage. Deciphering them was a puzzle wrapped in a threat. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, there were no neat bilingual texts, just fragments of Neo-Phrygian clinging to the edges of Greek grammar. The breakthrough came when linguists noticed recurring formulas, Greek invocations to deities like Hermes or Hecate, followed by jagged Phrygian imperatives. The Greek acted like subtitles, hinting at the curse's meaning. One tablet's Greek section pleaded for justice against a false friend, while its Phrygian counterpart spat specifics. May his bowels twist until he begs for death. The violence wasn't just poetic, it was calculated. These weren't idle wishes, they were psychological warfare meant to be discovered and feared. The tablets also reveal a society caught between worlds. Phrygian names like Baba or Midamus pop up alongside Greek ones, proving how deeply cultures had intertwined. Yet the curses themselves drip with pre-Roman superstition, invoking local deities like the storm god Bagaios alongside Olympians. Some even feature crude drawings, a snake coiled around a name, a dagger piercing a stick figure, visual amplifiers of the spoken hex. Scholars speculate these were commissioned from bilingual scribes, possibly priests who'd kept the old language alive in hushed rituals. But the real genius lies in the medium. Lead was cheap, malleable, and according to ancient belief, a conduit to the underworld. Once written, tablets were folded, pierced with nails, and tossed into graves or wells, physical vessels hurling words into the realm of the dead. Recent excavations at Aphrodisias uncovered a trove of them, still tightly coiled, their curses pressed like seeds into the earth. X-rays show layers of text, some so tightly wound they've never been read. What's haunting isn't just the malice, it's the desperation. These weren't the grand proclamations of kings, but the razor-sharp pleas of ordinary people. A weaver robbed of her loom waits, a farmer cheated in a land dispute. In their jagged lines, you hear the last gasps of a language weaponized by those with nothing left to lose. The Phrygian curses didn't just survive, they thrived in the shadows, proving that even under empire, some voices refused to be silenced. And sometimes they bite back. Buried in the damp soil of Bergen, Norway, a wooden stick no longer than a handspan holds the secrets of Viking Age spies. Carved with rows of deceptively simple lines and dots, this 13th century artifact known as the Brigand inscription isn't just a rune stick. It's a cipher, a clandestine message scrawled in a code so clever it fooled historians for centuries. At first glance, the markings look like standard Younger Futhark runes, the alphabet of Norse traders and poets. But look closer. Some runes are stacked, others flipped upside down, and a few bear extra strokes like hidden road maps. This wasn't just writing, it was encryption, medieval style, and the key to cracking it lay in the most unexpected place, aboard merchants' doodles. The genius of cipher runes wasn't complexity, it was adaptability. Unlike modern codes relying on mathematical algorithms, these worked by manipulating the rune shapes themselves. Take the twig rune system. A standard rune like Fehu, meaning wealth, could be disguised by adding branches to its central line. One twig might signal the first letter of the rune's name, F, while two twigs stood for its second letter, E. Suddenly, a simple vertical line became a linguistic chameleon, its meaning shifting with every added stroke. Another method, stungen or dotted runes, used tiny ink dots to mark alternate sounds like turning a T into a D with a single prick of the stylus. The Brigand inscriptions reveal this wasn't just theoretical. One decoded message reads, "Buy the English wool before frost," a proof that Viking traders encrypted market tips like Wall Street insiders. But why go to such lengths? The answer lies in the cutthroat world of Hanseatic trade. By the 13th century, Bergen was a hub of the North Sea economy, its wharves crammed with German merchants, Icelandic fishermen, and Danish tax collectors. In this pressure cooker of commerce, information was currency. A misplaced word about ship routes or tariff dodging could bankrupt a trader, or worse, attract royal scrutiny. Cipher runes offered deniability. To the untrained eye, a stick carved with 4 barrels of salted herring might look like a child's tally marks. Only those who knew the cipher, often passed down within guilds or families, could read between the lines. Recent breakthroughs have exposed just how widespread this practice was. Infrared scans of the brigand sticks, over 700 were found in Bergen's mud, reveal erased layers where runes were scraped away and rewritten, suggesting cipher drafts. One particularly cheeky example encodes a gossipy complaint. Eric's wife flirts with the sailmaker. Another, possibly tied to the church, uses Latin abbreviations mixed with Norse, creating a linguistic hybrid as secretive as a monk's marginalia. The real kicker, some cipher runes weren't just functional, they were playful. A 10th century Swedish runestone near Östergötland hides its message behind a cipher so poetic, it took a folklorist's ear to solve it. Instead of letter substitutions, the carver used Kenning's Norse word puzzles. The rune for sun might secretly mean day, while a sequence of seemingly random marks spelled out a riddle. The sea's flame guides the wise. Answer: gold, the Viking obsession. This wasn't mere encryption, it was a game, a test of wit between carver and reader. What makes these codes so enduring isn't their secrecy, it's their humanity. Beneath the layers of cipher, we find the same worries and whispers that fill our texts today. Love notes, business deals, even smack talk about rivals. A stick from Trondheim bears a coded plea, "Meet me where the birch bends." Another, found in a Danish well, threatens a thief with Odin's curse upon your hands. These weren't cold military dispatches, they were the casual, urgent, sometimes hilarious voices of everyday people, proving that the urge to hide and seek meaning is as old as writing itself. The legacy of cipher runes lingers in modern Scandinavia, where riddles and wordplay remain cultural touchstones, but their greatest lesson is subtler. In an age when we think of encryption as ones and zeros, these sticks remind us that secrecy begins with imagination. A slash of a knife, a twist of a rune, and suddenly the mundane becomes mystery. The Vikings didn't just leave behind ships and swords, they left us a challenge: look deeper, because nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The Avestan scriptures don't just survive in fragments, they defy oblivion through sheer scholarly stubbornness. Imagine piecing together a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces were deliberately burned, and the remaining few were scattered across continents. That's the reality of the Avesta, the sacred texts of Zoroastrianism, composed around 1200 BC in a language so ancient it predates Sanskrit. By the 10th century AD, after centuries of Islamic conquests and cultural upheaval, the original Avestan versions had nearly vanished. What survived were copies transcribed by Zoroastrian priests in Pahlavi, a medieval Persian script with handwritten notes crammed between the lines, like a fading echo of a once thunderous voice. But in the 19th century, linguists embarked on a detective story worthy of Sherlock Holmes, using these shadowy copies to resurrect a dead language. The key to this linguistic resurrection lay in the Pahlavi translations, but with a twist. These weren't straightforward word-for-word renditions. The scribes had woven the original Avestan verses alongside their Persian explanations, creating a bilingual tapestry where every archaic term was meticulously glossed. Think of it as finding a medieval cookbook where someone scribbled modern instructions beside ancient recipes. For example, a hymn to Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity, might appear in Avestan, followed by a Pahlavi note clarifying that Vohu Mana meant good thought in 9th century Persian. These marginalia became Rosetta Stones, allowing scholars like Martin Horg and Carl Friedrich Geldner to reverse engineer Avestan grammar and vocabulary. But the challenge didn't end there. Avestan wasn't just old, it was astronomically complex, with verb conjugations so intricate they'd make Latin blush. One verb could have over 90 forms, and its phonetic rules were a minefield of nasalized vowels and whispered consonants lost to time. To crack it, linguists turned to the Rig Veda, the oldest Sanskrit text, whose language shared a common ancestor with Avestan. By comparing cognates words like Sanskrit, soma, sacred drink, and Avestan, hayama, they rebuilt the linguistic bridge between these sister tongues. Suddenly, a word like deva, which meant god in Sanskrit but demon in later Avestan, revealed a theological rift, Zoroaster's rejection of older Indo-Iranian gods. The stakes of this decipherment were cosmic. The Avesta wasn't just scripture, it was the foundation of Zoroastrianism, a religion that shaped empires from Persia to India. Its creation myth, the clash between Ahura Mazda and the destructive Angra Mainyu, influenced Jewish, Christian, and Islamic concepts of heaven and hell. One rediscovered passage, the Gathas, contains hymns attributed to Zoroaster himself, his words vibrating with urgency. The world is a battleground between light and darkness. Choose your side. Without these texts, we'd have lost the blueprint for one of history's first monotheistic faiths. Yet the Avesta's survival is a tale of human devotion as much as academic grit. When Muslim armies swept through Persia, Zoroastrian communities fled to India, becoming the Parsis. They carried their texts in memory and fragmentary scrolls, preserving them like embers in a storm. One priestly family, the Dastas, guarded a near-complete copy of the Yasna liturgy for generations, its pages memorized through nightly recitations. When European scholars finally accessed these treasures in the 1700s, they weren't just studying manuscripts, they were handling a faith's last breath before extinction. Today, digital reconstructions stitch together the Avesta's scattered remnants, but gaps remain. Some passages survive only in Greek or Syriac translations, their Avestan originals dust. Others, like the lost Naskh's 21 volumes of lore and myth, linger as titles without texts, but every deciphered word is a victory against time. The Avesta doesn't just tell the story of a god. It's the story of words that refused to die, scribbled in margins, whispered in temples, and pieced back together by those who believed even the oldest voices deserved to be heard. Buried in the thick, loamy soil of China's Yellow River Valley, the cracked shoulder blades of oxen and turtle shells hold humanity's first known addiction to asking the heavens for answers. Dating back to 1300 BC, these oracle bones, over 200,000 fragments discovered so far, aren't just relics of the Shang dynasty. They're cosmic hotlines etched with the earliest form of Chinese writing, where kings sought advice from ancestors through a ritual as precise as it was pyrotechnic. Picture this, a royal diviner pressing a red-hot bronze rod into a polished bone, listening for the pop of the fissures that would determine everything from harvest dates to military campaigns. What might look like random cracks to us were, to Shang scribes, a celestial Morse code, the whispers of gods made visible. Decoding this system required a perfect storm of luck and linguistics. For centuries, farmers plowing fields near Anyang called these bones dragon bones, grinding them into folk remedies. Then in 1899, an antiques dealer spotted strange markings on a fragment and sold it to scholars who immediately recognized the symbols as archaic Chinese. The real breakthrough came when researchers matched the inscriptions to later bronze script, realizing the bones recorded not just divinations but actual historical events, droughts, battles, even a solar eclipse on June 5, 1198 BC. The script itself is breathtakingly pictorial, a swooping line for rain, a stick figure kneeling for sacrifice, a stylized eye for to see, but beneath the artistry lies ruthless efficiency. These weren't doodles, they were a streamlined administrative tool with recurring phrases like, "The king read the cracks and said," proving ritual met bureaucracy head-on. The divination process was part science, part theater. After polishing the bone smooth, scribes carved pre-written questions into the surface. Will the queen's childbirth be lucky? Or, if we attack the Qiang tribe next week, will we prevail? Then came the fire. As the bone heated, tension fractures spiderwebbed outward, their patterns interpreted by specialists trained to read meaning into every jagged branch. A long, straight crack might mean auspicious, while a forked line signaled danger. Afterward, the actual outcome was often engraved beside the original query, an ancient version of fact-checking. One bone records a prediction of clear skies, followed by a terse addendum. It rained. What sends chills down historians' spines is how these bones double as a time capsule. Beyond tracking eclipses and comets, some of the oldest astronomical records in existence, they name over 20 Shang kings previously thought mythical. The names matched later historical texts almost perfectly, proving Chinese chroniclers preserved oral traditions with startling accuracy across millennia. Even more intimate details emerge. A queen named Fu Hao appears repeatedly, not just as a royal consort but as a military general leading 13,000 troops, a revelation that shattered assumptions about women's roles in early China. Today, digital archaeology is revealing even deeper layers. Multispectral imaging has uncovered faded inscriptions invisible to the naked eye, while AI pattern recognition analyzes crack formations to see if modern physics can predict how Shang diviners read them. The verdict: there was likely method to the magic. Certain crack angles do correlate with bone thickness and heating points, suggesting generations of trial and error refined the practice into something bordering on empirical. But perhaps the oracle bone's greatest legacy is their stubborn humanity. Scratched into their surfaces are the raw fears and hopes of a civilization. Concern for toothaches, anxiety over dreams, even a plea to know why the king's ear kept ringing. In their cracks, we don't just see the birth of Chinese writing, we see the timeless urge to reach beyond what we know, to press heat to bone and demand the universe speak back. The Dresden Codex doesn't just track time, it bends it. Flip to its infamous eclipse pages and you'll find columns of numbers so precise they sent modern astronomers into a tailspin. These aren't vague astrological omens, they're razor-sharp calculations predicting solar eclipses down to the day in the 11th century using a base 20 numerical system so elegant it puts our base 10 to shame. The table's structure is hypnotic. Row after row of bar and dot numerals, each representing intervals of 177 or 148 days, critical numbers in the Maya's eclipse cycle algebra. But here's what leaves jaws on the floor. When NASA scientists ran these figures through their satellites in the 1970s, the Codex's predictions matched historical eclipse dates with near-perfect accuracy. How did scribes without telescopes or computers achieve this? The secret lies in the Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred calendar that interlocked with the solar year like cosmic gears. Maya astronomers noticed eclipses tended to recur in Saros cycles of about 18 years, but they refined this further. Their table tracks not just the sun and moon, but also the wobbles of lunar orbits invisible to the naked eye. One column counts 11,960 days, roughly 46 Tzolk'in cycles, after which eclipses repeat under near-identical conditions. That's 5 years of celestial choreography condensed into a single glyph. The math gets wilder. Modern analysis reveals the scribes accounted for lunar latitude, the moon's position north or south of the ecliptic. Pages 52 to 58 outline a warning zone where eclipses were possible but not guaranteed, calculated by tracking the moon's deviations down to fractions of a degree. They even compensated for the gradual drift of eclipse seasons, adjusting their tables over centuries. This wasn't guesswork, it was celestial calculus, built on generations of naked eye observation, so meticulous it detected patterns modern software confirms. One glyph sequence tells a chilling story: a skeletal serpent devouring a sun disk, a metaphor for total eclipses. Adjacent numbers tally 1, 365, 420 days, about 3, 740 years, a span so vast it likely represents their long-term eclipse forecasting horizon. But the real kicker, the codex includes error correction pages. If an eclipse missed its predicted date, scribes tweaked subsequent entries by a day or two, demonstrating a fluid understanding that celestial mechanics aren't perfectly rigid. When Hurricane Janet nearly destroyed the codex in 1954, water damage obscured critical glyphs, yet recent multispectral imaging has resurrected faded numerals, revealing even deeper layers. One reconstructed passage suggests the Maya didn't just predict eclipses, they ritualized them. Dates align with ceremonies honoring the death god Hunhao, tying cosmic events to the underworld's pulse. The Dresden Codex wasn't an academic exercise. It was a bridge between numbers and the divine, proof that for the Maya, time wasn't just measured, it was alive. The Coptic magical papyri don't just contain spells, they're a swirling vortex of gods, archangels, and demons all shouting over each other in one chaotic chorus. Imagine a world where a Christian monk might scribble a prayer to Saint Michael on one line, only to invoke the Egyptian god Thoth 3 words later, then finish by commanding a demon in the name of King Solomon. These 4th century texts, written on fragile papyrus in the Coptic language, aren't rigid theological treatises, they're the ultimate spiritual remix, blending traditions with a pragmatism that would make modern syncretists blush. One particularly frantic love charm begins with the Lord's Prayer before abruptly pivoting to, "Bind the heart of peasant to me, just as fire binds the frying pan." What makes these papyri so fascinating is their desperation. These weren't abstract rituals, they were emergency solutions for everyday crises. A farmer might bury a curse tablet to ruin his neighbor's crops, while a mother sewed a folded papyrus amulet into her child's tunic to ward off fever. The spells crackle with immediacy. "Release Sophia from her headache, O sun god," begs one text while another hisses. "Make Cyprian's bones ache until he returns my stolen coins." The language itself is a battlefield. Greek phrases jostle against Egyptian hieratic symbols. Hebrew divine names like Iau Sabaoth morph into quasi-magical vowels Iao, and even Jesus gets rebranded as a cosmic exorcist. "By the nails that pierced Christ, I banish you, demon of the gut." Deciphering them reveals layers of cultural theft and reinvention. The famous Sword of Moses spell, for instance, was originally a Jewish exorcism manual. Copied by Christian scribes, it gradually absorbed Egyptian underworld imagery until angels were commanding the Nile to flood, in the name of Anubis, the dog-headed one. One love potion instructs the caster to write a spell in myrrh ink on a fig leaf, then slip it into the target's wine, a technique lifted straight from Greek magical papyri, but now sanctified with a hastily added Amen. The materials themselves tell another story. X-ray fluorescence scans show that magical inks often contained real medicinal ingredients, copper oxides in headache amulets and ancient aspirin, ground lapis lazuli in eye-curing spells, early antibiotics. Even the papyrus fibers betray class divides. Elite clients got spells penned on pristine sheets, while poorer versions were recycled from tax receipts or shopping lists, their original 5 jars of oil now sharing space with invocations to archangels. Yet the most haunting aspect might be their vulnerability. Unlike sturdy codices, these were working documents, crumpled, stained, sometimes burned after use. A recently digitized fragment from the Louvre still bears thumbprints in its wax coating, as if its owner clenched it during childbirth or a court trial. Others show erasures where names were swapped out for new victims or lovers, turning each papyrus into a palimpsest of hope and spite. Today, these texts force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The ancient world didn't separate religion, medicine, and magic into neat categories. A single papyrus could move seamlessly from Psalm 91 to a recipe for summoning dream demons, all while name-dropping the Virgin Mary and the god Bess in the same breath. The Coptic magical papyri don't just record spells, they capture the messy, human instinct to try anything when the stakes are high. After all, when your baby's fever won't break, you don't debate theology. You grab every weapon on the shelf: holy water, pagan incantations, even the kitchen skillet, and pray something sticks. The Tocharian documents aren't just fragile scraps of Buddhist scripture, they're the last echoes of a people who shouldn't have existed. Nestled in the blistering sands of China's Tarim Basin, these 6th century AD manuscripts, written on brittle mulberry bark and wooden tablets, hide a linguistic bombshell. They're composed in a language as Indo-European as Greek or Latin, yet spoken thousands of miles east of anywhere such tongues belonged. Deciphering them revealed prayers and monastery ledgers, but their true shock value came from the mummies buried beside them: tall, blonde-haired figures in vividly woven woolens, their features so strikingly European they sent archaeologists reeling. Here was concrete proof that Silk Road caravans didn't just move spices and glass, they carried entire civilizations. The manuscripts themselves are masterpieces of cultural collision. Buddhist sutras in flawless Sanskrit share space with marketplace scrolls in Tocharian, a language so archaic it split from Proto-Indo-European before Celtic or Germanic even existed. One invoice lists 50 bolts of silk for the Sogdian merchant, while a monastery's ledger details payments in silver drachmas, a currency straight from Rome's eastern provinces. But the real stunner, a fragment of a love poem in Tocharian B. I long for your laughter like a thirsting man for rain. The intimacy is jarring proof these weren't just traders, but poets and dreamers carving out lives between dunes. Then there are the mummies. The so-called Churchen man, buried around 1000 BC, wears a crimson tunic and leggings straight from Celtic Europe, his face frozen in serene defiance. DNA tests confirmed it. These were no lost Mediterranean sailors, but a settled people with roots in the Pontic steppe, who'd hauled their Indo-European tongue across Asia millennia before. Their textiles tell their own story: tartan plaids identical to Hallstatt culture in Austria, feathered felt caps echoing Scythian burials in Ukraine. Even their makeup betrayed them. One female mummy's eyeliner contained lead from Spanish mines, traceable via isotope analysis to Rio Tinto. What blows historians' minds is how thoroughly the Tocharians blurred civilizations. A fresco from Kizil Caves shows a blue-eyed Buddha with distinctly Greco-Roman drapery, flanked by donors in Iranian tunics. Their monasteries used Chinese ink but kept accounts in Prakrit, while their diplomats likely bartered with both Han emperors and Byzantine envoys. The documents even hint at religious fusion. A Tocharian translation of the Maitreya Sutra includes Zoroastrian fire symbolism, as if heaven itself was up for negotiation on the Silk Road. The tragic twist: we nearly missed them entirely. Tocharian vanished by the 9th century, swallowed by Uyghur conquests and shifting trade routes. The manuscripts survived only because the Tarim's hyper-arid air acts as a natural preservative, locking letters in bark like insects in amber. Even their decipherment was a fluke. Early scholars assumed the script was a variant of Turkic until linguists spotted telltale Indo-European verb endings. Now, every translated word feels like reclaiming stolen time, piecing together a world where Mediterranean glass met Chinese lacquer, and honey-haired pilgrims chanted Sanskrit mantras under Central Asian skies. The Tocharians didn't just bridge continents, they force us to rewrite the map of antiquity itself. Carved into the weathered edges of standing stones across Ireland and Wales, the Ogham script doesn't just look primitive, it practically dares you to dismiss it as simple tally marks. But these precise notches and lines slashed along the corners of ancient pillars are anything but crude. Dating back to the 4th century AD, Ogham is often called the alphabet of the trees, its 20-letter system resembling branches and twigs. Each stroke corresponds to a sound grouped into 4 sets of 5, designed to be read vertically from bottom to top along a stone's central stem line. And while later medieval scribes would dismiss it as barbarian writing, these inscriptions hold the earliest whispers of the Gaelic language, a defiant declaration of identity chiseled into rock. Take the Ballacrovane Ogham stone in County Cork, towering over 13 feet tall. Its inscription, when decoded, reads, "Of Ranus, son of Camogan." At first glance, it's just a lineage, but peel back the layers and it's a land deed, a territorial claim, and a prayer rolled into one. In early Irish society, naming wasn't just about identity, it was about anchoring your place in the world. The very act of carving a name into stone was a legal act, binding descendants to the land as surely as a modern contract. Other stones amplify this: Magi Dubros, son of Ailil, or "Here lies Cormac, descendant of Eogan." These weren't tombstones in our sense, they were border markers, victory monuments, even legal disputes frozen in granite. The real genius of Ogham lies in its adaptability. Unlike Latin script, which required smooth surfaces and careful calligraphy, Ogham thrived on the craggy, uneven edges of Ireland's native sandstone. A scribe could carve it with nothing more than a sharp knife, turning any stone into a document. But here's the twist: many Ogham stones appear near old tribal boundaries or crossroads, suggesting they functioned like ancient billboards. One near Killarney bears the cryptic Netta Segamonas, possibly a personal name, but some linguists argue it's a territorial warning, a proto-version of "trespassers will be prosecuted." What's haunting is how these stones mirror Ireland's conversion to Christianity. Later Ogham inscriptions start blending pagan and Christian motifs. One in County Kerry reads "Colum the priest," while another invokes the soul of Logair. The script itself evolved, borrowing Latin letters to expand its range. By the 7th century, Ogham was fading, replaced by illuminated manuscripts like the Book of Kells. But its legacy lingers in place names and modern Irish surnames, that O or Mac in your family tree. It's a direct descendant of Ogham's stone-cut lineages. Today, digital scans reveal previously invisible strokes, hinting at lost messages. Some stones bear ghost notches, erased or recarved, as if someone updated their ancestry like a medieval Wikipedia edit. Others, like the Dunlow stone, have dual inscriptions: Ogham on one edge, Latin on another, showing a culture straddling two worlds. These aren't just artifacts, they're time machines, proving that even in the darkest corners of post-Roman Europe, people found ways to shout their names into the future. And sometimes all it took was a knife, a stone, and the stubborn refusal to be forgotten. High in the mountains of northern Ethiopia, hidden inside the stone walls of the Abba Garima monastery, two ancient books have defied time, war, and even scholarly skepticism. The Garima Gospels, richly illuminated manuscripts shimmering with gold and vivid pigments, were long assumed to be medieval replicas, perhaps 12th century copies of lost originals. That myth shattered in 2010 when radiocarbon dating delivered a bombshell. These weren't imitations, they were the real deal, penned between 430 and 650 AD, making them the oldest surviving Christian manuscripts in Africa and some of the most lavishly illustrated early Gospels anywhere on Earth. What makes this discovery so staggering isn't just their age, it's their isolation. While European manuscripts like the Codex Sinaiticus were copied and recopied across centuries, the Garima Gospels survived in near-original condition, untouched by the fires, wars, and doctrinal purges that consumed so much of the early Christian world. Their pages made from goat skin vellum, so finely prepared it still feels supple glow with illustrations that blend Byzantine precision with distinctly African flair. One page depicts the four evangelists seated under arched colonnades, their robes a riot of red, green, and gold. Another shows the crucifixion, with Christ's stylized face echoing the iconic art of Axum, the kingdom that first embraced Christianity here in the 4th century. The dating breakthrough came thanks to a sliver of parchment no larger than a fingernail. For decades, scholars had dismissed the monastery's claim that the Gospels were 1,500 years old, until Oxford's labs tested the collagen in the vellum itself. The results placed the manuscript squarely in the era of Abba-Garima. The Syrian monk tradition says penned them in a single day with divine help. Some pages even bear traces of soot, likely from candles lit by generations of priests who revered these books as living relics. But the real marvel lies in the details. The Garima Gospels aren't just translations, they're cultural time capsules. Marginal notes in Jez Ethiopia's liturgical language include corrections and scribbled jokes, like a doodle of a bird beside a particularly tedious passage. The pigments reveal trade secrets: lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, gold leaf hammered so thin it catches light like liquid. Most startling, the artists used a technique called split perspective, where figures are shown both frontally and in profile, a style unseen in European art until Picasso. Yet for all their beauty, these manuscripts guard stubborn mysteries. Who were the scribes? Why did their style vanish from later Ethiopian art? And how did these books survive when so much of Africa's early Christian heritage was lost? The answers might still lie in the monastery's shadows, where Abba-Garima's legacy lingers not just as scripture, but as a defiant testament to a faith that flourished where the world never thought to look. From the Rosetta Stone's linguistic skeleton key to the haunting whispers of the Phaistos disc's unsolved symbols, these manuscripts didn't just record history, they reshaped it. Each cracked code was a detonator, blasting open, sealed chambers of human thought. The Behistun inscription resurrected the epic of Gilgamesh from silence. Linear B-proved Greek civilization bloomed centuries earlier than believed, and the Garima Gospels rewrote the timeline of African Christianity with strokes of gold and lapis lazuli. Even the failed scripts, those still defiantly undeciphered, like Proto-Elamites' accountant puzzles or Rongorongo's eclipse carved wood, serve as humbling reminders that for every voice we've recovered, dozens still murmur just beyond comprehension. What's thrilling is how many breakthroughs began with sheer obstinacy. Champollion's 2-decade hieroglyphic obsession, Rawlinson dangling from a cliff to copy cuneiform, or Ventris, an architect moonlighting as a linguistic detective, proving academia wrong about Mycenaean Greek. Their victories whisper to today's scholars wrestling with scripts like Cipro-Minon or the Indus Valley seals. Some future genius, armed with quantum computing or AI we can't yet imagine, will pry open these vaults too. The next Rosetta Stone might currently sit in a museum basement, mislabeled as a paperweight, or in an attic trunk mistaken for folk art, which brings us to you. Hidden in local museums and university archives are fragments aching for fresh eyes, palimpsests with erased poems, lead curse tablets still tightly folded, or birch bark letters awaiting translation. The Dresden Codex was nearly dismissed as a curiosity. The Dead Sea Scrolls were almost repurposed as sandal straps. Every community holds shards of the human story, whether it's a county historical society's colonial ledger or a cathedral's illuminated marginalia doodled by a bored monk. These manuscripts teach us that history isn't a static monologue, it's a cacophony of voices, some clear as a bell, others muffled but still fighting to be heard. Your curiosity might not crack an ancient script, but it keeps their stories alive. After all, every deciphered word started with someone refusing to let the past stay silent.